So I arrived in Iran in 2005, February. I had taken Farsi lessons and spent a couple of months immersing myself in Farsi, reading a lot of books. I brought my scarf and my manteau, my long raincoat. But I was still carrying in my mind a lot of the images that we have received through media with that certain specific kind of lens. And most of the images were something a little bit like this, usually with some Kalashnikovs added to it. Of course, this is part of Iran. This is the tradition. Not that I wouldn't say the Kalashnikovs, but this is traditional Iran. This is from a religious festival in central Iran that I was at. At the same time, what I arrived to in Tehran was more something like this, showing the influence of satellite television, the influence of technology, the fast-changing youth culture in Iran, where 70% of the population is under 30. And it's an example of the contradictions in the society. A culture where malls and materialism are transforming the culture, particularly in urban areas. A place with a craze for plastic surgery. If you notice the bandage on his nose, I counted 5 other people with bandages on their nose at the same mall that day. So this is a place where what you see isn't, things are rarely as they appear to be. One of the stories I became interested in, because I was interested in the way that media and technology was transforming the culture, was the bloggers. There's about 100,000 of them. In Iran, it's the 3rd most common blog language in the world. So I started to interview some of them. Some of them had been arrested. Some of them had been threatened by the government. And I decided to interview one of the legal experts in the country, Shireen Ebadi. You may have heard of her. She's the Nobel laureate of Iran. And she is a human rights activist, a lawyer, very well respected, but also has done her own time in jail. And this is a story a little bit about some of the contradictions that are in Iran. So I made an appointment to interview her and arrived at the address by taxi and started looking for the address and realized that they'd given me the wrong street address. I was wandering through the neighborhood looking, and a woman came out. She was on her daily walk, and she asked me what I was looking for. I explained I was looking for Shireen Ebadi's office, and she started to help me. Well, it wasn't very long until a police cruiser came up. Now, I should mention here that I went to Iran undercover. I didn't go on a journalist visa because usually you can only stay a week, maybe 2 weeks, and also you are usually watched, sometimes followed, and I was worried about how this would impact the work I did. And also, you usually aren't allowed to leave the larger urban areas as well. And I wanted to be able to be free to move around. So the police officer came out and came up to me and asked for my passport. And first of all, he asked what I was looking for, and I was coming up with a story of some kind when the woman I was with said, oh, she's looking for Shireen Ebadi's office. So that was that. And I knew that Shireen Ebadi had a very difficult, fraught relationship with the authorities. And so he asked for my passport, and I remembered, of course, don't give your passport to anyone unless they show you their ID, identify themselves to you. But I thought causing a scene isn't exactly what we want here. We want this to move along easily. So I gave him my passport. He opened it and started reading the type of visa that I had, jotting down all the information, and then handed it back to me and said, don't you know that you shouldn't be giving your passport to anyone unless they give you their ID? And then he opened the back of the cruiser and told me to get in. So here was where I was thinking about, my original thoughts going there was at some point I'm going to end up in the police station, and I really didn't know where this was going to go. I couldn't remember if I had the Canadian Embassy's phone number with me. So I decided to just play it cool and not ask too many questions. And we were driving through the city when I heard the call go out on the radio. A Canadian writer looking for Shireen Ebadi's office. Does anyone know where Shireen Ebadi's office is? So within about 10 minutes, they had delivered me right to the door just in time for my interview. Now, this is just an example of the contradictions, how you don't get what you expect to get in a place like Iran. Things don't always end up so nicely, but it is a place where you don't get what you expect. I decided that I wanted to go and visit Kurdistan after meeting a Kurdish man, one of the Khans, the feudal lords, who was about 85, and having him tell me a lot of stories. So I decided to go to Kurdistan, which is off limits to journalists. It's a very difficult place to go. It's in the northwest of Iran. The Iranian Kurdistan is in the northwest of Iran. The rest of it is spread across 5 countries. Now for Tehranis, the rest of Iran outside the urban centers is completely another country. So when I told friends of mine that I was going there, they inevitably drew their hands across their necks and assumed that I wouldn't be coming back, or that's what they told me. It wasn't something that I could do on my own. I would have loved to have gone on my own, but as a single woman, first of all, the intelligence won't let you stay in those areas as a single woman, and secondly, it would be very dangerous. But I did happen to meet 2 others who really wanted to go, and one was an Iranian who'd come back to Iran after 30 years living in New York, and one was a Slovakian who had hitchhiked all through the Turkish, Kurdish area in Turkey. So the 3 of us decided that we would go together, and since Kurdistan it's basically treacherous mountain passes. It's very difficult to get around without 4x4. So we decided that we would hitch rides on the backs of these 4x4s. And soon enough we realized that these 4x4s were basically smugglers' trucks, bringing tea and alcohol from Iraq into Iran. And this is most of the economy in Kurdistan, which is very underdeveloped. And part of the reason that Kurds feel so resentful of the governments where they live is because there's so little government attention to their needs, there's such high unemployment. So most of the economy is smuggling, and if you're not working in smuggling, you're working in intelligence. And sometimes you're doing both. And it's really kind of like cowboy country out there. So we spent a couple of weeks going through these areas, and very aware, of course, that we were being noticed wherever we went, and we were also staying generally with locals along the way, because they tend to invite you along with them, to stay with them wherever you go. One of the places that I stayed was with a Kurdish family whose son was involved in the national independence movement, which is, there's only one topic of conversation in Kurdistan, and it's national independence. And I had come in wearing my jeans and my black manteau, and I hadn't really had a chance to change in a couple of weeks. And the women were quite upset at this and wanted to wash my clothes, and so they decided that I had to be dressed in one of the national Kurdish costumes, which for the women is like being a princess who's late for the ball. So I don't know how happy I was about this. I don't look very happy, in fact. But you don't feel like you have to do much work when you're wearing those clothes. Somebody else should be doing things for you. But anyway, this is an example too, I think, of going into this kind of work as a woman gives you a kind of interesting perspective, because first of all, you can go into the world of women, but also the rules are kind of suspended for you if you're a Westerner. So we got to know a lot of the Kurdish, the Peshmerga, the Kurdish independence fighters. And I'll just tell you this one other little story about Kurdistan. A number of them had spent time in jail. A number of them were really involved in agitating for independence. And I was looking at my journals the other night and recalling exactly what happened when I was there. And I thought I'd read you just a little excerpt from my journal. On a hillside overlooking farmers' fields, we lay down a blanket under a tree, and Jawad opens the ouzo. The women had not yet arrived with the food. He pours ouzo into plastic cups and adds douk, a sour yogurt drink. We toast. The rolling fields are cleft with trenches from the Iran-Iraq war. The hills where we sit among the high grasses allowed a good view of the enemy.